Hello, welcome to episode 6. If you're watching on YouTube or another platform, I would like to begin today by referring to episode 5, in which I misquoted and misspoke. The sentence from A Course in Miracles, Workbook Lesson 135 reads, "Without defenses, you become a light which heaven gratefully acknowledges to be its own." Yesterday, or whenever you listen to episode 5, I spoke and I said heaven gradually instead of gratefully. Now, let's talk about this sentence in another way than I spoke of it yesterday. When I read heaven, I define that in my understanding that heaven is that place we go in meditation where all is well, where the ego relaxes into the nothingness that it is, where I am quite alive and awake, but I'm no longer participating in the dream of living as though it's real, as though it's the end. We kind of live, when we're living from the ego, as this is the real world, the world where we have challenges, the world where we have problems, the world of separation, the world where there's something to get and something to improve and something to excel at and something to lose at, and where there are all kinds of deficiencies, discontent, suffering, wanting, needing. You get the idea. We all know it. Anyone watching this or listening understands about the separate self. So if heaven is the place between your inhalation and your exhalation, where there's no thought, no feelings, unless you're having heart trouble, no struggle. Heaven is that place. That place is not gradual. So that's why I needed to come back to that sentence. What's gradual is for those of us who've been on a progressive path, and we awaken more and more and more to the real world, is that place of equanimity, that place of heaven, if you will, that's right here. And it says, that same sentence says, heaven gratefully acknowledges to be its own. Well, that's a way that the Course speaks to understand and communicate to the separate being. In my opinion, or in my understanding, the gratitude that's spoken is not really a feeling of gratitude. It's a belonging, where the puzzle piece that fits into the heaven piece, the bigger piece, the wholeness piece, the entire universe. It fits so perfectly. Think of a really odd puzzle piece, like misshapen, like quirky, all kinds of edges, misshapen. It is the perfect shape, so that's not the correct word, but it has rounded, quirky edges and some points and who knows what else. And then you place it in the puzzle where it belongs. And there is kind of an like what a great fit. And that's the image, the metaphor I want to give you today about you and life, you and this kind of heaven, you and the universe. When you leave the thoughts and feelings, your perceptions, your judgments, especially your seeking and your attachment to being right and being separate, everything is possible at that moment. Everything is possible. What if the belief in a separate self is just an activity of thoughts and feelings? What if there is no truth to that? One thing we know to verify this sentence, the truth of this sentence, is that there hasn't been a single thought or feeling in your life that has stayed. They come and they go. We might repeat them, and we usually do. We have certain scenarios, certain thoughts, certain feelings that we repeat over and over. And that's the story of the ego. I'm being rejected. I'm not smart enough. I should do better, work harder, do more. The list that never ends for every day, rather than allowing the unfolding of every day. What if the sentence from chapter heading 18 in the text, that there's nothing outside of you, what if that is truth with a capital T? What if you and the whole puzzle are one? That's the oneness. That's heaven. Heaven is knowing that we belong. Heaven is knowing that there's nothing wrong with us. Heaven is knowing that there's nothing to fix. You and your quirky self are just right. There's nothing you need to do. Once we realize that. Now, A Course in Miracles starts where we are. I've mentioned this probably in every video and every audio show. But the Course is progressive. And the direct path of non-duality says that the moment we realize our location, if we've located ourselves into a separate person, a body, a localization that is Rosalind or Dove or Lynn or Mary or Steve. Once we're identified with that body, two things can happen. Of course, many things can happen, but hang with me just a minute of these two different trajectories or paths in the road. One is when we use local awareness to notice that we're believing. That means identifying at this particular moment that we're the person. Then in a direct path, we know in that instant that we've left home, we've left heaven. So there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no fixing. We just return. And our behavior and our thinking and our feeling come along. I want to be really clear. The small mind does not realize heaven. But the small mind on the other path can use local awareness to notice that we are living from a pretended separate self. If we stay there, and in the beginning we have no choices in the sense that we don't know our home, so we have to start somewhere. That is where mind training comes in. That is where self-help comes in. That is where psychology comes in, and therapy and trauma work. And it involves the local awareness. Now, what is the local awareness? It's noticing our thoughts and our feelings. It's noticing our attack thoughts, noticing our judgments. And here is where the Course in Miracles is invaluable. It teaches us that we actually have a lot of attack thoughts, and that when we are localized, when we're identified as a body, that's where the attack thoughts begin. Because we're already in untruth. We're already in an LIE, as Dove loves to say, as part of belief. There's an LIE in there. And that lie says we have to do it all. We have to manage our lives. We have to control other people. We have to do things that are impossible. But the gift is in the noticing. And there's even a gift in the judging, because as we step back, when we didn't know we were judging, and now we step back and notice the judger, oh, there's another third door, a third opportunity, a third break in the road, a third trajectory back home. Because when we notice the noticer, we've stepped back. Now we're not in it, and we're stepping back into the awareness of the place that we always expose, awareness with a capital A. If you've been with me on any of my meditations, we go to a place of neutrality. Neutrality doesn't sound very attractive to the ego self that loves highs and actually lows because it keeps us in the game. But there's something, whatever you call this space, that's not a space because it has no edges and there are no boundaries, and it's part of everything, and it's part of you, and you are part of it. And we are in the quantum field when we go into these meditations. And when we go back and back and back and watch the movie of our lives that we're playing, now we can enter the place of awareness that has no opinions, no judgments, and it's beyond the evaluator, it's behind. But all of these steps, if you will, become part of our experience. And when we're in the separate self, there appears to be a chooser. There appears to be a separate person. So that separate person chooses again. And we can choose between love and fear. In awareness with a capital A, there is no personal self. There is only that collective self, that person we've been taught to be almost in a hypnotic state, to see ourselves in this illusionary way as separate. But if there is no separate self, then we can always, at any moment, return to heaven because we never left. We only had a thought of leaving. We only had a fear of leaving. So let's go there now. And today, let's go there with our eyes open to that place that we've talked about, that spoke of home. But let's start with our eyes open, because in most of our day, our eyes are open. We have no trouble going to sleep at night unless you have a sleep issue. But we naturally close our eyes and we know that we're headed to drift off. Now let's do that with our eyes open. And I might suggest that if you're watching me on video, you take your eyes off the screen. And I'll do that now myself. And notice the room that you're in. And notice the feeling that you're separate from the objects of the room. And let's soften our eyes so that we see not only objects, but we see the space around any chairs or furniture. And let's go back and forth between seeing an object and seeing the space, and seeing the space and seeing the object, and seeing another object and seeing the space, and then seeing them all, the first object, the second object, the space. And now make sure your eyes are still soft, not grasping as we usually do when we're seeking. Let's let our eyes be like our ears that just receive. And in that receiving of ourselves within the room, know that our energy is received. The silence of the room is pulling us in. We are the silence behind the talking and the thinking and the feeling. Frances Lucille has a beautiful book called The Perfume of Silence. Let's pretend that what's holding this room together is now holding our bodies as well, not just our energies, not just our quantum field where we fit with other energies. Let's feel our bodies being absorbed into the room, into the space between the objects, including the objects. All the objects are included, including us. If we were to notice, inclusion is a letting go. We've just let go of the personal self. If you would take a deep inhalation and a deep exhalation and let the room absorb you. And let the space between your inhalation and your exhalation be one with the space in the room. You might notice that there is no suffering in this place. It's just the oneness. Now, we spoke of the silence in the room, calling, attracting like a magnet, the water that's flowing in your body. Let these two energies attract each other. I'm not sure if that's scientifically correct, but it doesn't matter. The oneness is all that matters. There aren't right thoughts and wrong thoughts. There are just thoughts that belong to the local self. And so, what if this silence in the room has a smell and odor of fragrance? Take it in now as a perfume that you're very attracted to. They say in psychology that when we have a sexual attraction to someone, whatever their body odors are, even when we don't discern them, resonate with us. They smell good to us. And we know that people, all people, are attracted to pleasure. We recoil unless we're disturbed in some traumatic way. We recoil from harm and suffering. And yet, the conditioned self goes back to a belief in being separate. What if that was a lie? What if truth is this place that we are with our eyes open, knowing oneness with eyes open? For most of us to be in what we used to call meditative state is home. What if this is true home? What if this is what we are? What if this is who we are? Isn't that good news? When you're ready, since your eyes are already open, you can join your life with whatever there is to do. But you can do it from this place, not as the doer, not as the seeker, but as the channel, as the vessel of heaven, which is the truth. You've been a truth seeker, or you probably wouldn't be listening to this. Let's all decide to be a truth finder. I know there's no decider, but we have to use language, which is inherently dualistic. So we can claim this moment in time to be our home, where we're called back by the perfume, where we're called back by the pleasure in the lack of suffering. Return with me. Let's return together. Let's be part of a movement that no longer claims that we're a separate self. Let's be part of a new movement that includes everyone as their own puzzle piece of the whole. Bless you. You are what I am. Let's go forth into our day as the loving I am, because that's all you can be. You can only be what nature holds forth from you. And it's loving to be in a storm. All weather is loving. We don't have to make a story or suffering out of certain actions and feelings are loving. It's all the agape love of nature, inclusive of all appearances. It's all the one. Thank you. And please subscribe to YouTube and leave a comment. That would be so helpful. Thank you. And have a good one or a bad one. If it's in life's language, knowing that it is all part of the one and we don't have to make a story out of it. Namaste.